Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music at Monmouth University's free, virtual, and very informal monthly series called Conversations with Our Curator. There's no hair, there's no makeup, there's no professional lighting. There's just great content. I am Melissa Ziobro, the Director of Curatorial Affairs for the Center and a history professor here at Monmouth University, just a mile from the beach in beautiful West Long Branch, New Jersey. Tonight, we are chatting with a fellow Monmouth University professor, author, musician, Jay Sweet. Jay will tell you a little bit more about his background in just a moment. We are here to discuss Jay's book on the celebrated jazz musician Ray Brown. But before we dive in, just a few housekeeping details. As I say over and over again every month, apologies to our regulars who hear me say this over and over again. But we do have a lot of new folks every month, and it is my job to spread the good word of the center to everyone that I can. So if you are not super familiar with our work, we are the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music. So we are Bruce Springsteen's official repository, yes, but we also seek to celebrate the diversity of American music in all its genres and forms across centuries with our exhibits, our programming, and our publications. As a public historian, I'm always going around telling people how I believe that music is one of the most accessible prisms through which we can understand our shared past. I'm sure you have someone in your life, I hope you've never thought it, but you may have someone in your life who's thought history is boring. And to me, I always find that to be absolute craziness. And as I tell my students, if you think history is boring, then it is simply because it was taught to you wrong, because history is not just about memorization, it's about amazing stories that teach us who we are, how we got to be where we are today, and how we as a society can be our best possible selves going forward. So yes, I get very, very excited about history that is both educational and accessible. And that's what we strive to do at the center. So we at the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music are in the midst of building a brand new, roughly 30,000 square foot facility that will be our new home. It is on the campus of Monmouth University, and it will open around the spring, late summer of 2026, just in time for America's 250th birthday. How exciting, right? It will feature a roughly 250 seat theater, exhibits, the archive for research, a small gift shop, and more. You can learn more about our work on our social media or on our website, which is springsteenarchives.org. You can also donate on our website because we are a 501c3 and we are constantly fundraising for both our operational and our capital costs. So I will put the link tree in the chat so you can get connected with us today if you aren't already. So thank you for giving me just a couple minutes to introduce us to you a bit. Like I said, there are always some new names in the registration for these programs. So back to tonight's program. Conversations with Our Curator specifically is this free monthly series where I have the great fortune to interview researchers and writers exploring new perspectives in American music history. Sometimes the books are about Bruce, yes, but as I just told you, we are also the Center for American Music. And so we interview all kinds of music writers. I just really wanted us to have some programming that was accessible to folks wherever they are, regardless of whether or not they can visit us for our many wonderful in-person events here at the Jersey Shore. So after some initial questions from me, We will then open the floor to audience Q&A, and I'm very punctual. I started my career as a historian for the Army, so punctuality means a lot to me. We're going to keep it to 1 hour. We have one more book lined up for 2025. Next month, we'll be looking at John Morrison's new book on Boys to Men. So I'm very excited about that. You can, again, find all of the information about all of our programming, conversations with our curator, and otherwise on our website, springsteenarchives.org. So with that, let's get into Professor Sweet, who'll be talking about his book, as I said, on Ray Brown. So, Jay, can you just give us a little overview of you to start, like a biographical sketch?
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here. Biographical sketch, everything music. I mean, my whole life is surrounded by music. Right now, I'm talking to you from my music school in Howell, New Jersey, where we teach children. Of course, I teach over Monmouth music history courses. I'm the bass professor there. Also teach guitar there, performing all the time, recording a lot. Oh boy, what can I tell you? It's been music, 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 and it's been a joy to have that in my life and to make that my career.
Now, we are going to focus, as I've said, on your book on Ray Brown, but you've got a number of other books. Can you briefly just tell us about those?
Yeah, sure. I have 5 books. Some of them are textbooks. I have a history of American music, which is a course I teach on occasion. I have a book on the music of 1964, the 30 most impactful, 50 most impactful albums from that year, goes along with a podcast that I do called 30 Albums for 30 Years. In addition, I have a world music book, which is a course I'm teaching now, the history of world music. What other books do I? I just keep putting, and then a general from sound to sense, which is my textbook that I use with my students for music appreciation.
I had to giggle a little bit. Look at you, Professor Sweet. You've got so many books, you can't even list them all, right?
Well, I'm on cold medication, so I'm not remembering as much. But and then I do write on occasion for Downbeat magazine. I do a monthly column for Jersey Jazz magazine, and my Jazz Real Book podcast is becoming very popular, which I'm very happy about as well.
Awesome. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
So, what first drew you? No, actually, let me pause. Now we did a thumbnail overview of you. Give folks, because inevitably each month we've got some folks who come in having read the book. And if they haven't, they are going to go out and buy it as soon as we're done. If they haven't read the book, if they don't know much about Ray Brown, give us a thumbnail overview of Ray.
Sure. Well, Ray Brown, here he is, Ray Brown. Ray is like a deeply fascinating guy. Even if you're not a bass player, he's a jazz bass player, one of the most well known, one of the most recorded. But the book is really a history of jazz through the career of Ray Brown, who recorded with essentially every famous jazz musician during his lifetime, married to Ella Fitzgerald for several years. And if you are somebody who is a bass player, I mean, Ray Brown is sort of the pinnacle of perfection when it comes to playing the bass.
So, what first drew you to Ray as the subject of an entire book? I mean, you had done some textbooks, right? Your books thus far seem like they've been very kind of multifaceted. Why hone
Sure.
in here on Ray?
Yeah, so this project started as my master's thesis. So this was really the first attempt I had at writing a book, and after several failed attempts as well. um, Partially because I wanted to keep as much of the perspective of the musicians who I interviewed, including like many of the greats who are no longer with us, Oscar Peterson and Hank Jones, and many big names in jazz. And I wanted to make sure that their voices were preserved, their interviews that I did. But Ray Brown, what first drew me to Ray Brown, as a Berklee College of Music student, I went in and I wish I had known more going in. But one of my first bass teachers said, you should listen to Ray Brown. And he gave me a cassette of his playing. And his name happened to be Whit Brown, but no relation. And he just everything in our lesson came back to Ray Brown, Ray Brown, Ray. So I I got into his music, you know, and I didn't know much more about him except his music. And then as I got more interested in him as a person, I realized this guy was fascinating. Not only was he a recording artist and had toured the world and made his own records, but he was a great businessman. He was Quincy Jones's manager, Diana Krall's manager. Uh, wrote method books, taught music. Really had his finger on the pulse of everything. And a studio musician in LA. He's on. If you listen to, if you've watched any movies from the 1960s or 1970s, Ray Brown is somewhere in there. I mean, he was just doing everything and anything. Even appears on some Doors albums, Blondie, you name it. He worked with the gamut. So, as somebody who wanted a career in music, with a bass focus, I kind of patterned my career a little bit after what he did, which is to be as versatile as possible, to see different different possibilities and try to be a little bit ahead of the curve. And that's what Ray Brown was. And that's why I was so fascinated with him as a person.
Just that brief sketch there, right, illustrates such a fascinating individual who's left such a mark on American music history. But I'd venture, I guess, that most of my students would have never heard of Ray Brown. Right? I mean, do you think that he is an underappreciated figure in American music history? And if so, why?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I guess yes, underappreciating that. If you're not a musician, you might not know his name. And if you're not a jazz musician, you might not know his name. But if you've ever listened to music for any length of time, you've heard his playing. It
Mm.
could have been on a Frank Sinatra record. It could have been on the Bill Cosby show. It could have been on any number of things. Charlie Parker, Ella Fitzgerald, you name it. So yeah, I mean, definitely underrated in that regard. But if you are a bass player, Ray Brown is held in the highest regard. And it was amazing to me until I started to do this book that there wasn't a biography on Ray Brown. The fact that he's on over like 2,200 recordings now makes me realize why no one took up this project, because it was like such an effort over 20 years of research and listening, um, and just hours and hours and hours. But sure, I mean, if you've ever heard a Billie Holiday record, there's a good chance you heard Ray Brown. So, yeah.
I am always jotting down notes as I'm talking to the authors, and I was literally writing, why do you think there was no full-length bio up to this one? And it's interesting because I think one might expect the answer to that question to be, well, there's not enough material to do a book. But if I heard you right, you said there's just so much material. It was so much to process.
Yeah, there's so much material. And even when I was even discouraged somewhat to choose him as a subject, even for my master's thesis, which was a program in jazz history and research. But also Ray Brown had a pretty steady life in terms of a lot of jazz musicians succumb to, addiction, very often heroin addiction, imprisonment. There's no real arc in terms of like a downfall with him. He was on this like he had some years where they were a little more lean, but really the guy was just a consummate professional. So he might not be the greatest subject, say, for a film, but for a study on music, no doubt, Ray Brown is deserving.
Hmm. So his career covers decades of American music history.
Sure.
Does he evolve in any ways that perhaps surprised you once you were really digging into analyzing these, over 2,000 recordings?
Yeah, he was like a chameleon. He was what was fascinating about him, and is something I try to do when am I playing, is he always maintained his individual personality on the instrument and as a musician, but he was able to adopt that to different musical styles, even stuff I know he didn't really love. There'd be times where he'd be in a recording studio making 4 or 5 albums a day, and yet he was able to do it. So, his evolve, and then at one point he had to pick up the electric bass. He didn't love playing the electric bass, but he did it to help his living when he was in the LA studios. And also, gosh, I mean, and then evolving when he saw that there were going to be lean years in jazz, particularly in the 70s and 80s. He figured out a way. He went to Japan. He spent a lot of time promoting other musicians, working with people like Quincy Jones, who I mentioned earlier. Bringing Diana Krall to the fold. Just his ability to shift and adapt and to do something different in music almost every day.
You just noted that there were lean years for jazz in the 70s and 80s. Can you explain to our guests here why that was?
Yeah, so Ray Brown, I mean, he came up in the bebop era pretty much. It's kind of the tail end of swing into the bebop era with people like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. In fact, his first major notoriety came working with those two individuals, which is a fascinating story to begin with. And then moved into working with Oscar Peterson. I don't want to get to do the whole timeline, but as you go through the time, jazz had many subgenres. In the 1970s, it started to shift to like a rock jazz hybrid, what we call jazz fusion. Pretty much Miles Davis, Bitches Brew, he started that movement. Ray Brown really wasn't all that interested in that. He was a purist in many ways, but he was able to kind of work within the outskirts of that. So just able to evolve in that way. I guess I forgot the original question, but yeah, and oh, through jazz. So, and then in the 1970s, so traditional jazz had become very lean. But even in that time, he was still finding opportunities to play in a traditional way, the way he liked to play. 1980s, it really started to fall apart a little bit, and then there was this resurgence kind of in the 1990s. And at that point, he was looked upon as an elder statesman of jazz, and he very much liked to work with younger musicians. A lot of the musicians who he brought into his trio at that time have since gone on to very successful careers. So yeah, there was a few lean years, and particularly it happened at the tail end of his studio. In 1960s, he moved to LA to work as a studio musician, moving away from New York, the center of jazz activity. And you could see through his discography that, 100 records, 70 records, down to about 30.
Mm.
And then it kind of built back up.
Why did he make that move from the East Coast to the West Coast?
To make a living. I think he
Mhm.
just he really knew. He had worked with Oscar Peterson for 15 years as his primary bass player. I mean, they toured the world. There was nothing more for him to really achieve in traditional jazz. He saw that trend. He had this great ability for foresight. He can always kind of see a little bit ahead of what was going to happen. And while others kind of pushed against the curb and sort of fell off and really struggled, Ray Brown could see ahead of it. So he went to LA, I think it was 1965, to work in the studios. Began working with Henry Mancini on all his films, and I mentioned Quincy Jones a few times, many of his films as well. So he knew that in order to make a living, he needed to make a shift to continue to make a living, and that's what
Okay.
he did. Yeah.
I'm always so interested in the author's process. So, obviously, in your work on this book, you listened to his vast discography. What other essential voices or archives helped you bring the book across the finish line?
Yeah, sure. Well, similarly to what I think is going to be happening at the Bruce Springsteen archives, or the American Music Archives, I should say, there is an archive in Newark, New Jersey, Rutgers, which is the biggest jazz library as far as.
Bravo. We love our friends there at the Jazz Institute.
Yeah. And that's what brought me. That's where I did my master's. I went there specifically. I was like, it was like Disneyland for me. Every record, every anything related to jazz was just there, and people who were super knowledgeable about it. So I would spend hours and days there, and just fine tuning everything. And then the end part of the process, which I think you're referring to, was basically working with my editor, who
Mm.
was very he's a very noted guy, Alan Shipton. So Alan Shipton writes a lot. I believe he's a Yale grad, but he's much smarter than me. And he has a photographic memory, I think. And he pushed me so hard to get every detail exactly right, to the point where I don't know if he would agree with this, but it almost got contentious. I said I had to actually call the guy and say, you're just insulting, man. You like at this point, you're just being insulting. But it pushed me to be a better writer. I think I'm a much stronger at the time was a much stronger researcher than a writer. So getting those finite details and then also just interviewing the few individuals who I was didn't quite get initially. Again, this was like a 23 year process, so even more actually. So that's how it all kind of culminated.
It must have felt so very good to finally hold the book in your hands after so long.
It was, yes, yes. It was my greatest disappointment not having put this book out. I was, it was like, because it was so close so many times. And then I let it sit for a year. I had a family and I didn't touch it for 5 years or so. And then, little by little, I would revise it. COVID happened, and I was like, this is ridiculous. I've pretty much hit a lot of my career goals. This one is like it was literally haunting me. So yes, having a final product and one that I'm actually proud of is a good feeling for sure.
If I can go back to the Jazz Institute at Rutgers for a second, do they have Ray Brown's papers, or did he donate his papers anywhere, or was that just kind of lost in the ether?
No, they don't have his stuff. The Smithsonian has some of his stuff, and I did work with them a little on getting some photos and some papers. This is going back way to figure out his genealogy. I had to go with the microfiche and the whole thing. I forget where in Manhattan I went to do that. It was so long ago. But no, they didn't. They really just had all the articles on him and all of his recordings, including recordings that were somewhat rare. And when you have a guy who's recorded, so prolifically, a lot of those rare recordings are not going to come to fruition because there's just so much material. It's not like a musician who had like a span of only like 4 or 5 years. He was decades of work.
Yeah. Well, speaking of decades, Ray's career spans eras of profound social change here in the United States.
Yeah.
How did the broader cultural and political landscape shape his opportunities and his artistic choices?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Ray Brown, he was very careful, obviously a black man. He was very careful about his words when it came to race relations and even politics. You don't really hear much about him. He would reference it at times, but I am early on when he was going and playing across the Mason-Dixon line, especially with an integrated band. He did reference that there were some challenges for sure. And Oscar Peterson, who was his band leader, talks a little bit more about that. But one of the things he worked very closely with a guy by the name of Norman Granz, and Norman Granz is this monumental figure. He was the owner of Verve Records, the and producer. But even before that, he would put together stage shows, and he forced them to allow an integrated audience very early on. He wouldn't allow his performers to perform if they didn't. And even then the theater had to be not segregated in any way.
Mm.
And he pulled a lot of concerts because of that and lost significant money. He was a real champion for civil rights for sure. And Ray Brown was his guy. He was his bass player. So for a lot of Ray Brown's career, he worked on what was called Jazz at the Philharmonic. It was a traveling show of all-star musicians, most of which were kind of past their commercial prime. And he was the bass player, and then they would basically have these jam sessions at the very end. And they would travel to different countries and Germany as well. Norman Granz is a Jewish individual, and he saw a lot of things for sure. So I don't know that anything he was doing specifically was shaping that, but through his contacts, definitely he was.
Again, I'm so impressed by how long you stayed with this project. Did your views on Ray Brown change significantly in any ways in the 20 plus years you were studying him?
Oh, wow.
Or maybe it's like, no, I loved him 20 years ago and I love him still, you know?
I mean, I got to, I met him, met is a loose term. I did get to be in his presence on three separate occasions. And they are quite funny stories, actually.
Well, now
And
you have to tell us you started it. So
sure. So the first time, and this was very bold. It was a a project for my master's, and I had to interview an artist about in connection with John Coltrane. And there's this reference that Ray Brown might have worked with John Coltrane, but it's kind of Coltrane wasn't famous enough at the time, and Ray was just working so much. So I had to ask him this question. So the first time I tried to connect with him was at the Blue Note, and I was bold enough to try to go to his dressing room. And I went into the bathroom upstairs, and he was in the bathroom. And he got angry and said, "What are you doing here?" And and I didn't ask him a question. I just enjoyed the show, and that was it. The second time was at Jersey City College. He was doing a talk, and I finally was like, "I'm going to ask him this." In essence, it was a stupid question, really, but I wanted to ask him this one question so I can get this paper done. I was late because there was insane amount of traffic. I did leave enough time, I swear. I get there and he initially points me out and he says, "Oh, I see you're late," or something like that. And then when I finally asked my question, he goes, "Oh, it's the late guy." Like, so he was, um, so that wasn't all that comfortable. I did press him, and he basically said he didn't record with Coltrane, even though he doesn't know that he did, but he did. And then, or he didn't know he did. And then finally, towards the latter part of his life, he had a knee surgery, and for his 75th and his final year, he was touring, and I think it was a Blue Note once again, and I did talk to him on the bandstand. And at this point, I had already talked to a lot of people who had known him, and I mentioned a few names, and then I asked him about his early days in Pittsburgh, and it sparked his interest because these were names he wasn't often asked about, not famous musicians per se. So we spent a good maybe 10 minutes, and I got to talk to him. My impression of him, and having talked to people who know him well, if you had to garner his respect. He
Mm.
wasn't necessarily the most welcoming person always. If you caught him in the right mood, he was. But he was a tough guy in that way. You know, you had to really show him respect, and then I think you would get respect. And I kind of appreciated that about him. I wish he was a little bit more warm because I had spent so much time but he doesn't know me. He doesn't know what I was doing, even though I tried to explain it. Um, but yeah, I mean, I am endlessly fascinated with the way he lived his life, and I became more and more fascinated with that. And as I listened to more and more recordings that I had no clue was him, you know, that also changed my impression in a positive way. You know, just how prolific he was.
Well, this is a natural transition to another question on my list. If Ray could read your book, what do you think he would say?
I think he would like it. I think I want to think that because it's there is some speculative. Sorry, I'm a cold. I had to speculate on some things. Sorry. But for the most part, it's very fact-based. And he liked that. And I think he was like a very cut and dry guy with that.
Mm.
So I'm hoping he would have appreciated it. You know, I think I'm a little bit more confident now in my craft, especially having interviewed so many of my heroes that I think we would have had a nice conversation and he would have appreciated it, you know.
Aw. Aside from Ray, what do you hope that other readers, musicians and non-musicians, will
Right.
take from the book?
Oh man. Well, I hope that people become more aware of this guy for sure, but just how prolific he was, how he was selfless. Like he did recordings where he did show off and he did his things, but they were usually under the Ray Brown moniker. He always serviced the music, and that's why people loved him. If you needed a bass player and you needed a job done right, it was Ray Brown. I can't tell you how many times I'm on a gig and I'm trying to read somebody's music, something new. They're like, play like Ray Brown did on this, or, you know, because he was just the pinnacle of like professionalism. You know, he wasn't the most exploratory musician. for sure, and he gets a little bit of flack for that.
Hmm.
But he certainly had that ability, but it had to but he loved the tradition. He loved the early jazz tradition. I mean, he grew up listening to his father loved Fats Waller. That's what he was into, growing up.
Now, Jay, you are an educator in many different aspects, right? You've got your music school, you are a college professor. What do your students make of Ray Brown when you introduce him to them?
Well, my bass students have no choice. And the thing about Ray Brown's playing, 80% of it, if you're an intermediate level player, maybe even more, is achievable.
Okay.
But he's also an incredible technician, but chose his times to do that. So he's a great figure for learning because of that. So I do the same that my teacher did for me. I give him recordings and I do it in a specific way so that they're more accessible recordings and then more maybe stuff that is even for me very difficult to play, you know. Um, and in terms of my students who are non-musicians, I use them as an example of how to be a professional musician. I had a student ask me the other day, like, what do I do after college? What do I do with this degree? It's a music degree. And I'm like, you have two options, you could ultra focus on one subject, be the greatest. You want to be a producer, be the greatest producer, have no backup plan, tunnel focus on that. Or if you want to be like Ray Brown, have your hands in as many things as possible, be accessible, be around the scene, be willing to shift, and be versatile. And that's what I'd like that people know about him for sure.
Hmm. Do you feel that you exhausted the subject of Ray Brown in this book, or do you think there are still areas for exploration? You look like you're laughing a little bit. Why? Is that a crazy question?
No, it's not. I'm just trying to think what more somebody could do.
You're like, Melissa, it's been 23 years. What else is there to
It's an insane amount. I mean, listen, a book is only so big, so there's so much more.
do?
I guess maybe if someone wanted to go more into his life, his outside of music,
Hmm.
I did interview his wife. I interviewed his son, so I got to know a little bit about him and all his colleagues and friends. The only criticism I think out of all the reviews was that someone wanted to learn more about him as a person.
Hmm.
My apologies. Struggling with today. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. But he was private. He was a private guy in that way. He was close with his friends. And again, was he a saint? No. I mean, did he I think he explored some things, but for the most part, he just lived a pretty measured life, and never affected his career, any of his activity. The guy played golf, that's what he liked to do. He liked food, he liked cigars. So maybe someone who maybe knew him even more personally, but I really talked to the people who were closest with him. So I don't know what more you could do, except for if no, I don't know.
Also, Jay, I have to say, as a public historian, we are constantly worrying about shared authority. Like, if he was a very private person, I love that you then stuck to his musical career and the public side of him and didn't go digging for dirt about him and Ella Fitzgerald necessarily?
Yeah, I mean there is some dirt in there, like that was an interesting relationship. Um, I found that I think he didn't really know Ella's age when they got married because I got I have their marriage certificate. I think she lied a little bit about how old she was.
Could elaborate on that for our audience a little bit.
Yeah, so Ray Brown, he met her on a gig, as you would imagine, and he was younger than Ella, I think by 9 years or something. And yeah, it turns out there was like some discrepancy on some paperwork, what she said, how old she was, and that. Um, And I don't know, that relationship ended for several reasons. They remain very close, but oh man, I'm sorry about this voice. I'm losing it. But I'm sorry. Ray and Ella, they were together, and he wasn't musically satisfied working with a singer. He had an opportunity to do other things, and it pulled him away from her, and she felt very much that he should be by her side.
Hmm.
And she was a big star. But he really helped her career as well at that point because Ella Fitzgerald, prior to meeting Ray, was looked upon as like a cutesy singer, not a
Hmm.
serious singer, and he brought her to the jazz world
Yeah.
that even as a younger musician. So, but she was very hurt by the fact that he didn't want to be that he was looking for other opportunities or taking other opportunities.
Oh, that's so interesting. So Jay, I normally this is where I would open the floor to audience Q&A, but you have been so gracious about sticking with us even though you have this cold. Do you want to break it here or are you okay with some audience Q&A?
No, let's give it a try. I think.
Okay, thank you for toughing it out. So, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, you can unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can type it in the chat, and I would be happy to ask it for you. And I have a question all teed up from my beautiful mom who always joins us. Hi, mom, I love you. So Grammy asks if there were 2 to 3 songs that you were going to recommend people listen to learn about Ray Brown, to fall in love with his work, what would they be?
If I could change it to albums, because songs would be tough, uh, but his first
That's
solo.
right. He's got 2,200 recordings, so we got to go with whole albums.
Well, Gravy Waltz would be a song. Gravy Waltz, he wrote, and it was the theme song for the Steve Allen Show, which is a very popular late night talk show. And it was re-recorded many times with lyrics. So that would be one of his songs. Most people don't know he wrote it. He won a Grammy for that. Um, he did an album called Bass Hit, which was one of the earliest bass feature albums, and it really shows off his skills. And then there's an album called Live at the the Shakespeare and Stratford Festival, which is a live album with Oscar Peterson. And that album really exemplifies his ability to play. But there is just such a wealth of material. It's really hard to narrow it down in that way.
Hmm. I respect that answer, right? With someone with such a vast body of work. Again, everyone, you can unmute yourself to ask a question, or you can go ahead and type it in the chat. How would you describe Ray Brown's legacy, Jay?
Impressive, unmatched. Um, uh, I don't know that there'll ever be another. I mean, there's a guy by the name of Ron Carter who would certainly fit that bill. He's maybe the only bass player who recorded more than Ray Brown. But yeah, I mean, it's just so impressive, and I don't know that there will ever be another person who has their finger on such the pulse of so much activity surrounding the jazz with a jazz focus as Ray Brown. So yeah, very impressive.
Okay. I have a few folks unmuting. You okay to do a few more?
Yeah. Let's go.
Okay, cool. John, I see that you unmuted. John Barry.
That was a mistake, but I did want to say that I walked in late to a Roger Hodgson concert once in a venue with about 800 people, and he did the same thing to me that had happened to you, and it was pretty mortifying.
Yes, especially when you have such a high regard for him, and it was really a big pain in my ass to get there. I felt so I was very embarrassed for sure.
It was hard to
Listen,
recover from, definitely.
Yeah.
Jay, at least he didn't also remember you as the person who had cornered him in the bathroom. I mean, it could have been worse. No.
I don't think he saw my face so much. Yeah.
Mark, go ahead.
Hi, Ray. Hi, Jay. How are you?
Hi, Mark.
I'm sorry, I came in a little late, so yeah, I'm sorry if I'm asking a question that you might have covered. And also, as you were just mentioning, songs for and albums, I was on Amazon and I'm downloading stuff to listen to right after this. How did your interest in race start?
Yeah.
And I know there's probably a really long story, but if you just want to recap it, quickly.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, it was a bass teacher when I went to Berklee College of Music. But honestly, even before that, which I didn't mention, I had met when my first week at the school. You meet other musicians. I saw a girl with a bass, and we started to talk. And she said, "You ever hear of Ray Brown?" And I didn't know of him.
Oh,
Which, and so she's like, "You need to know who that is. You know,
interesting.
you're at Berklee. You don't know who Ray Brown is." And that was kind of the thing. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like what we all go through now, which is there's so much music and everything out there that things slip through the cracks. And I'm kind of just learning more about jazz and listening more to it. And it's always like, oh, wow. People throw names at me and I'm aside from, Bird and, Chet Baker and
Yeah.
Mingus and the usuals, it's always cool to find new ones. So, thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, he was a guy. I mean, I was still very young, didn't know much about jazz at all. I mean, I played in my high school jazz band, so I thought I was a jazz musician. I didn't know anything. So it was so overwhelming the amount of knowledge that I was getting, mostly from my peers, but also from my instructors. So when she mentioned a bass player that I had to listen to, of course I was going to check it out because I mean, Mingus was my guy prior to that. I knew about Mingus and Jocko and stuff, but I didn't know Ray Brown, and thank God she did that.
Here's a
I'm
question.
sorry, Melissa, just real quick. You might be interested in this, Jay. Nate Adderley, which is related to Cannonball, I believe, is playing tomorrow night in New Jersey. So I have
Yeah,
something to go to early. I'm going to try to go and check him out. But I think
yeah,
he's
yeah. At the Americana tomorrow night.
yeah.
Yeah, I play there frequently. I've never
Oh,
worked
do
with
you really? Okay.
Nat. I never worked with Nat, but I heard he's a very fine
Is
musician.
he related to Cannonball?
He is related to Cannonball.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. I'm gonna try to get over there after a dinner I'm going to with some friends, but yeah, which I thought was cool.
Good place to see a show, and the food's very good too.
I remember when it used to be much more diner-like. Now it's much more high-end restaurant-like.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I'm playing there later this month, I believe. So yeah,
Oh, very
I'm
cool.
there quite a
All
lot.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I might pop in sometime then.
Excellent.
Jay, let me ask actually, while we're talking about live music, if people want to follow you and your music, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, jsweetmusic.com. So all my books, information on my podcast, all my articles, my interviews from Downbeat magazine and such, they're all on there. And I'm around, I'm a member of Jersey Shore Jazz and Blues. Our president, Tom, is there. So we're always promoting jazz and blues music throughout the Jersey Shore. So you're welcome to come to one of the events and talk to me there as well. But I play about 4 or 5 nights a week still.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm always around, and a lot in the area, Red Bank, Asbury, steady gig in Belmar at Brandel Restaurant on Friday nights. So yeah, I'm always playing.
Here is a question from Steph, who is a former student of mine and a current high school history teacher and just a dear, dear friend. Do you have any plans on the horizon for future books on music history?
Yeah, always, always. So, you know, although I love jazz, I'm very interested in a lot of things. So right now, uh, I'm working on a book on the music from 1990 to 1994. So, my earliest experiences on stage was playing grunge music and Seattle sound music, playing at the Stone Pony and as a high school student, even opening for a lot of those acts who became bigger bands. But I think that was one of the last real monumental errors for music, maybe because it coincided with my high school years. I don't know. And in addition, I'm working on a book on the bassists of Bill Evans. Bill Evans always had the best bass players, a piano player from New Jersey, in fact. So I am actively doing research on that as well.
Jay, I'm curious, why 90 to 94 specifically?
Well, 94 was when Kurt Cobain passes away, so I think that was like an end of an era for sure. And I just think that shift from sort of that very produced, even hair metal kind of bands, stuff that wasn't very organic.
Do not talk bad about hair metal in my presence, but go
Oh,
ahead.
I actually really liked it. You know, that's what got me into music when early on. I wanted to do that. And I went to a Poison concert when I was a kid.
Yes.
But I think that was one of the last, it was like a real era of music in that time. And also, again, I think it's because it was my high school years, probably had something to do with it, but the Lollapaloozas and the stuff like that. So and it coincides with my podcast is 1964 to 1994, the music of that, when the Beatles come to America, when Kurt Cobain passes away. And I think that 30-year period for popular music will never, I don't know it'll ever be matched.
Thomas Baldino, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I see that you have unmuted. Did you want to ask a question or say something?
I would like to say something.
Please.
Say hi to Jay. I haven't seen him since last night at our board meeting. But when Jay was released, I do some writing for a blog that we have on our Jersey Shore Jazz and Blues Foundation website, and I read the book and I reviewed it. And as a non-musician and someone who is a music lover of all styles of music, it was a revelation to me. And I just thought Jay did such a great job chronicling the entire life of this man, which lasted from the 20s to the 2000s, almost. So it was quite a span, and I thought you did a really thorough job. And I was going to ask you how the process worked, but now that you've told me it's taken 23 years, I don't know if you kind of went to it, got back to it, and back and forth, and life got in the way. And I'm just so glad that you did it, because I learned an awful lot about jazz music that I didn't know by reading the book, and I would recommend it to anybody who'd like to read it.
Thanks, Tom.
Thomas,
Yeah.
can I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you like to tell us just briefly about the Jersey Shore Jazz and Blues Foundation?
Sure. We've been in existence for almost 40 years, 1987. And actually, we have ties to Monmouth University. We do a program every year with them called From Clarksdale to the Jersey Shore. We've been doing that for a few years, and we're hoping to take that into the new venue when it's open. We're really excited about what's going on there. But we do we do a number of things around, mostly Monmouth County centered, but we do events like Jay has a jazz jam, we have a blues jam, we have nights that we feature jazz and or blues artists. We do a festival in Long Branch every year in August. We also do scholarships and emerging artist awards. We gave out 5 of those last year. So we're trying to move the music on to the next generations, and sometimes not an easy thing to do. But now that we've tapped into Jay with his school, we definitely think that we have a better foothold on that kind of stuff. So we're excited to be working with Jay.
Amazing. And Thomas, what is the website for Jersey Shore Jazz and Blues Foundation if people would like to stay connected?
It's jsjbf.org.
Awesome. So everybody, you're going to go check that out. You're going to buy the Ray Brown book and learn all about Ray, and then you're going to go check out the Jersey Shore Jazz and Blues Foundation website.
Please do. And if you're interested, we've got a holiday party at McLuhan's Supper Club on December 7th, where we'll have a jazz band and a blues band and a lot of good times. So that you can find that on our website.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Well, let's start to wrap up here because, as I said, Jay has been so gracious about sticking it out, even though he's not feeling well. Jay, any last closing thoughts from you?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And like Mark was saying, anyone who's looking to learn more about jazz, once again, this book is really like a history of jazz through the works of Ray Brown. I mean, the guy played with everybody. So there's very few people that you won't get to know about at least. And you know, I'm always happy to talk music, always happy to talk about Ray Brown or anything jazz or anything American music. So again, thanks for having me. Really
Amazing. And tell us your website one more time.
Yeah, jbsweetmusic at gmail dot I'm sorry, jbsweetmusic.com. And also if you're interested in the music school and want to take lessons, sweetmusicacademy.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jay. We hope you are feeling better soon. Everybody, thank you for joining us. Please keep in touch with us at the Springsteen Archives. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, like everywhere, and at springsteenarchives.org. So we hope that we see you again soon. Thank you so much, Jay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.